Hi everyone, this is Josh with SlatePeak.com, and this video is going to be the second part of the Building a Software as a Service startup tutorial, which is going to cover building authentication using Node and Express and the Passport package, along with plenty of other ones that we'll need as dependencies. So let's get started. I'm just going to kind of dive in. And if you go to the blog post where this tutorial is at, which is going to be linked in the comments, or in the description, sorry, you'll be able to read this a little bit more in depth. But basically, the reason I decided to use JSON Web Tokens here is because it seems to be a pretty scalable authentication system and stateless, which is part of the RESTful ideology of building an API. So that's kind of why. There's plenty of reading out there on JSON Web Tokens themselves, as well as just on authentication. It's kind of crazy because I started trying to build my own web app, and I was looking around for information on building authentication because I needed to log users in, to register them, and have that be secure and scalable. But that's one of the first things, at least in my mind, that needs to be built in an application, because you have to have users for just about any SaaS company. So that first thing seemed to be pretty complicated to get right. There are actually a lot of companies out there like Auth0 and Stormpath who have built their business on helping other businesses with authentication. So I found plenty of tutorials out there on kind of putting Passport together with a local strategy or with social logins, but I didn't find too many that were up to date with putting Passport together with JSON Web Tokens. So I kind of hacked together some knowledge that I had from different places and put it together. And please let me know if you don't think something sounds right in the comments, because this could be a learning opportunity for everyone. So that said, let's get started. I'm going to put the link to the blog post below in the description, and I'm also going to put a link to the GitHub repository where I've been putting the code. So if you want to follow along or double check your code against mine, go ahead and do that. Check the description for that information. So the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to make sure that we're in our main folder here. So I renamed mine SaaS-auth because I'm trying to keep these different tutorials files separate, so I can kind of organize better. Yours might be called SaaS, it doesn't matter. So now we are going to make a couple directories. We want to make sure, I'm using iterm2 here, we want to make sure that we're in our project folder by using cd for change directory. Then we're going to make mkdir app config public and source, or src. As you can see in Atom, these folders were all just made. Great. So now we're going to cd into app, and we're going to mkdir models, and then we're going to cd ... to get back to the main project folder again. And now we're going to install some of our dependencies. So npm install, and then we're going to need body parser. This is going to allow us to get information from post requests to Express. We're going to need JSON Web Token to generate our JSON Web Tokens. We're going to need Passport. We're going to need Passport JWT. We're going to need bcrypt. If you're on Windows, you're going to want bcrypt-node.js. You're going to have a little bit different process for hashing, so please look at the documentation for that, because I'm not on Windows. I'm not actually going to have to do that. Okay, anyway, we're also going to need Morgan just for logging purposes, so we can see what's going on in the terminal. So that's do all that, then do --save to put all of that in the package.json file, as you'll see this update once these install. So now we've got a second here while that's happening. Cool. So everything worked there. Now we're going to go into our server.js file, and we're going to import the dependencies that we just installed here. So between Mongoose, the Mongoose import and the port declaration here, we're going to add var body parser equals require body parser var Morgan equals require Morgan, var passport equals require passport, and var JWT equals require JSON web token. Cool. So now we're just going to start. We're going to start logging requests, and in order to receive data from post requests, we're going to have to set our app to use Morgan as well as body parser here. So use body parser to get post requests for API use. Great. And now app.use body parser .url encoded extended false, and then app.use body parser .json, and then to log requests to console app.use, and you'll see what this means in just a second here. Morgan dev. And then we're just going to quickly add a homepage route, and this is just going to give a demonstration of what Morgan does. So home route, we'll be changing this later, but not in this tutorial. So when we go to that home page, that root directory here, function request response send relax, we will put the home page here later, just so you're not freaking out. Told you to relax. Okay. Now something I want to go over here quickly is if we start the server to run like we did in the first tutorial every time with just npm start, you're going to have to kill the server and restart it every time you make a change. In order to get past that, we're going to have something called nodemon, which will watch for changes and automatically refresh the server. So if you don't have that yet, what you're going to do is npm install -g for global nodemon. I already have it, so I'm not going to run that, but once that's installed, you're going to, instead of using npm start, you're just going to do nodemon server.js. As you can see, it's watching. Your server is running on 3000. Now let's go ahead and go localhost 3000, and this is just going to go to the home page. See, we've got that. This isn't the Morgan though. Let's see what Morgan's doing. So we go up into our terminal, and you see this get 200, which is a response code, and then the amount of time the request took. That's Morgan. That's showing that the request came in. It's logging the request, and that's what Morgan does. It's helpful for seeing that your server is getting the requests you're putting in. So there we go. And just to quickly show you a little trick, Command K will reset. It won't reset, but it'll clear out the terminal, so you get rid of that mess that we just saw. It's kind of nice to just keep it fresh. So now we're going to create our main config file, and we're going to go back here, and we're going to cd into config here. And then in config, oh sorry, you have to actually open up a new terminal once you have nodemon running. So now we're going to go back into our root directory here. So cd, for me it's dev, SaaS auth, and then we're going to cd into config as well. And now we're going to create a main.js file, which is going to be our main configuration file, and a passport.js file. That's going to be our passport setup, or passport config. So now we're going to open up the main config file we created in Atom, or your code editor, whatever you chose to use. And we're going to do module exports equal secret. This is for your JSON web token. In order to not store the tokens in the database, it's going to basically use this secret to encrypt and decode the JSON web tokens that are created. So you're going to want to do some crazy long passphrase or something here, but I'm just going to put something top secret here for now. And don't do that, just change it, do your own thing. Never do that in production. And then we're going to do our database. So it's going to be MongoDB / 127.0.0.1 27017 / SaaS tutorial. Yours is going to be different, probably. You can set it to that if you want, and that's if you have your own Mongo server running. What I'm actually doing, though, is I'm doing mongolab.com, and I did this get 500 megabytes for free. Log in here. I'm not going to show this because I don't want people putting things in my database. You can set yours up for free and easily, and then just paste the URL it gives you with your login information there, and I will change that in a bit here when I need to. So now we're going to have to go back, though, once you save this main.js file. That's definitely important. Oh, and we also have to put a semicolon there. Okay, so we've closed that. Now we can go back into our server file, and right underneath the passport import here, we can do var config equals require config main. And you might be wondering, why aren't we putting main.js? Node just knows. Node just expects .js files, so it's gonna find it. If you had a different extension, you'd have to put it in there. And once we get to the React component and we start using .jsx, we're gonna have to put .jsx. But for now, since we're just doing .js, we're fine just putting main. Okay, so now we can set our Mongoose to connect, and we're gonna go ahead and do this right above the home route that we created. So connect to DB, and then mongoose.connect config.database. Okay, so I'm trying to make this pretty simple to follow. So config we set right here, and it's requiring that main.js. It's grabbing this database URL and connecting to that with Mongoose. Next up, we're going to create our user model. And this is kind of this could be a new concept. We haven't talked about it here. So we go into app, models, and we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it user.js. For this, we're going to need Mongoose. So import Mongoose. And we're going to need bcrypt. And remember again, if you're on Windows, bcrypt-node.js. And your encryption part's going to be a little different, so you're going to have to Google that. I think Scotch.io has a good tutorial on using bcrypt-node.js, so you might want to look at that one. Okay, so the schema defines how user data is going to be stored in the Mongo database. So that's what we're going to create here. Oops. User schema, var user schema equals new Mongoose schema. Okay, now we have to set some properties. It's an object. Type string, lowercase, true. And that's just to make sure that all the input here is lowercase, so you're not going to have case-sensitive type issues when you try to do logins and registrations. We want these to be unique because you don't want multiple people with the same email address signing up. That'd be weird. And we want to require this field. Gonna need to put a comma here because we're moving on to the next one, which is password. Type string, and it is also required. And then finally, role. Role is going to be type string enum here, it's basically, this is saying, okay, it can only be these things. So expect one of these. Client, maybe we want a manager, and maybe we want an admin. And then the default is going to be client. Okay, there's our schema. That's what our users are going to look like in the database. And then there's also going to be fields like the ID, which Mongo automatically creates. So now we're going to save the user's hashed password. You don't want to store passwords in plain text. Not good. So user schema pre. Oops, sorry, there should not be a dot here. User schema pre save. So before the password, or before the user schema is saved, we're going to run this function here to hash the password. So we'll close that quick. Var user equals this. If this is modified, if the password is modified, or the password is new, bcrypt gensalt 10 function error salt. You can look at the documentation to see what this does for bcrypt. If error, return error bcrypt.hash user password salt function error hash. If error return next error. That's going to have to be closed. I'm just doing that now. Else you're going to set the user password to hash, which is going to be the hash password. And then next, just so it doesn't get hung up here, it's going to need to be closed also, and then else return next. Okay, that is going to handle the hashing part. And now we also need to create a method here to compare the password. If somebody's trying to log in, you're going to compare that the input on the login to what's stored in the database here. So bcrypt will actually compare that. So user schema dot methods dot compare password equals function. It's going to take the arguments of the password, call back here, and then bcrypt.compare pw this password function error is match if error return callback error callback null is match. Okay, and then we need to export this so it can be used. Mongoose model user schema. Okay, that's what that file is going to look like. So basically, just to recap, it's requiring the user's information to be structured in this specific way here, the schema is. It expects the email, password, and role to be stored as a string. And yeah, I mean, I covered this, but the email and password are going to be required. The role is going to default to the client. This will allow you to basically not worry about people becoming admins, because it's just going to default right over to that that client. There's probably going to be, we might want to beef up security on this down the road, but for now this is going to fly. Okay, so yeah, duplicate accounts are going to be prevented by that unique true field that we have on the email. And then again, I just wanted to point out that we used this pre-hook to run this whole hashing before the user was saved in the database. Okay, and also down here with the isMatch is going to be returned true if the passwords are the same. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. Pretty self-explanatory there. So now we're going to set up our passport strategy. So we're going to open up passport.js in config, and we're going to set var JWT strategy equals require passport JWT dot strategy, and var extract JWT equals require passport JWT dot extract JWT. And then we're going to bring in the user model that we just created. So require app models user. And then we're also going to need to bring in our config here. So var config equals require /config /main. Now this is just going to be the setup work and export for our JWT passport strategy. So got to set up that export. Here are options. Opt.jwt from request. This is something that's required now, and this is something I had to find in the documentation for passport JWT. I didn't see on any other tutorials online, and this is telling it to check the headers from the authorization headers for the JWT token, or that's kind of redundant, the JSON web token. As you can see here. So we don't have to actually write our own function to do this. It's just built in, which is really nice. So secret or key equals, and then we're setting the secret for the JWT authentication to the config secret here. So we're going to be using that same secret to encode and to decode the token. Now passport.use new JWT strategy with the options we just set function. It's going to take in the JWT payload as an argument, done here. And then user, find one with the ID JWT payload ID function error user. I think that looks right, yeah. We're gonna have to close these later, but if error return that error if the user is true here, null user, then else done null false. That needs to be closed, that needs to be closed, and that needs to be closed. Okay, so save this. Basically what this is doing is it's just telling, it's setting up the strategy for passport. It's saying, okay, these are the options we're requiring. We're needing it to extract the JSON web token from the authorization header, which we'll get into shortly. We're going to be using the secret that we set over in the main configuration file here. And we're going to find a user with the ID that was requested. And we're going to run our checks on that. Yeah, so let's go back now into the server.js file. And let's bring the user model in, because we're going to need that. So right underneath our config here, we're going to put var user equals require /app /models /user, and then underneath where we set up our Morgan logging, we're going to go ahead and put initialize passport here. So app.use sets our app to use passport. Oops. And then right below our Mongoose connection here, we're going to bring in the passport strategy we just defined. Okay, so that's going to look like require dot /config / passport, and then we put passport over here as well. Now we're going to create a new group of routes called API routes. So basically, right below that import we just did for the passport strategy, we're going to put create API group routes, and this looks like our API routes express router. It's bringing an instance of the express router in, and now we can create our registration route. So register new users. I'm gonna clean that up a little quick. Okay, so API routes dot post. It's looking for an HTTP post request / register function request response. If request body does not have an email, or the request body does not have a password, then we're gonna give a JSON response here that says success, or the success is going to be set to false, and the message is going to say, please enter a user or an email address, because we're using email addresses to register our users, not usernames. You could add usernames if you wanted. Okay, oops. Else, I'm going to set a new user equals a new user. So this is going to set it to check against the schema and then run the save and the hash and all that. So email, we're setting the email here to the post requests body email, which we would set on our front end, but we're going to use Postman, which is a Chrome extension, to actually check this, or to actually play with it down the road here. And password, it's going to be set to request body password. Close that. And then we also need to attempt to save the new user. So yeah, if that validation ends up passing through, then we're going to actually try to save the user. So new user .saves. .save is a Mongoose thing. Function error, and it's actually going to try to save to Mongo. So if we're getting an error, then we're going to return JSON message, or the success is going to be false, and then the message is going to say that email address already exists. Oops. And then if we don't get an error, then we're going to set our response to success true, because it's going to be successful, it's going to save. And message is successfully created new user. Oops. That's closed already. Okay. So remember here, our password is going to be hashed thanks to the pre-hook in our user model. So now we're going to create our actual authentication route. This is where things are going to get pretty cool. we'll type through the code really fast. I'll kind of talk about it a little bit as I'm going through it, but I'll probably talk about it more after I finish because it's kind of distracting to type and talk at the same time. But yeah, it's basically going to check if the user's credentials check out, and if they do, then you're going to get a JSON web token in return that you can use for future requests. So here we go. API routes, same as last time here. Post request to /authenticate. Function, request, response. Close. User, find one. Another Mongoose thing. Email. Request, body, email. If there's an error, then it's going to throw the error. If there is no user found with the email address that is attempted to log in, then we're going to say rest.send success is going to be false again, and the message is going to be authentication failed, user not found. From the front end, if we get this success false, maybe we want to return them to, redirect them back to the either the registration form if there's no user found, or back to the login is probably more standard. So we'd probably send them back to the login form at this point. Else, we're going to check if the password matches, because there are no problems with the username. It got a match so far. So user, using the compare password method that we created in the user.js file, body.password. It's going to take the password from the request, the post request. Then function error is match. Close that before I forget, and that one too. And now, if it is a match and there are no errors, then we're going to go ahead and create the token. Variable token equals JWT. Going to pull in that JSON web token from up here. We set that to JWT. So JWT dot sign user config secret. It's going to encode it with that secret, like I mentioned before. And then expires in. You can set this to whatever you want. You could set it to 20 seconds if you want them to have to relog in every 20 seconds, but I'm just going to set it to a week. So keep in mind, in seconds. And then respond with some JSON. Success, true. Message, or wait, no, actually we're not sending a message here. We're sending a token back now. It's going to be equal to JWT with a space, and this is just how the tokens are stored here, and then the token will be there. This is how it's going to be looked for in the headers, so that's the format we put it in here. Okay. Close that, and then else, the password doesn't match, send a response, success, no, false. Message, authentication failed. Passwords did not match. Okay, making sure all these are closed really fast. Great. And now we're going to go ahead and just create a single, I guess I think I did a pretty decent job of explaining what was happening here. Basically, when somebody submits a post request to the it's going to be /API/authenticate, but since, I'll explain that bit in a bit. Anyway, /authenticate, it's going to search through the users for a user that has the email address equal to the email address that was sent in the body of the request here. If there was no user there, it's going to throw an error here. If there was another error, it's going to be thrown here. If there was a user with that email address, next we're going to use the compare password method we set in the user.js file, and we're going to compare the password with the one that was sent in the request to the one that was stored in the database. And then if it's a match and there were no errors, we're going to go ahead and create the token and send the token. We set the expiration of the token. It's going to hold the user's information. We might, in a real use case, want to change the amount of information that's put here. Maybe we just send the user's, username or email address. Maybe we don't send everything. That's something we'll talk about later. We're going to encode it with the secret, and then, again, set the expiration and respond with success true token JWT plus token. If it doesn't work out, false. Message is the authentication failed, passwords didn't match. Okay, so now the last things we need to do here before we can start testing, and are pretty much done here with this tutorial, is we need to protect at least one route, see that it's working. So we're going to go ahead and do protect dashboard route with JWT. This is kind of a random route. We're just using it for test purposes. We'll get rid of it in the next tutorial. So check dashboard, passport authenticate. This is how we're going to actually run that. Use our strategy here. So JWT. We don't need sessions. We're stateless. So session is going to be false. And then function with a request and a response. We'll close that. Rest.send. It worked. User ID is, and then plus rec.user underscore ID, and this is going to return the ID of the user. ID is a field. The underscore ID is a field that's put in automatically by MongoDB when a new entry is put in. It's kind of like, if you've ever used MySQL, it's kind of like making a primary key to an ID. It's a similar concept with the auto increments. It's just kind of a random looking string. You'll see in a second. I don't know why I'm explaining that much. So then we're going to set the URL for our API group routes. So it's going to kind of set the base for all these that we use, API routes dot blank. You'll see in a second as well. So app.use /API API routes. So everything we used API routes for is going to have /API prepended. So the dashboard route is going to be /API /dashboard, for example. Okay, so now we need to open up Postman. And this is command space Postman. Postman is something you can download on the Chrome. I put the link in the blog post, but you can get it on the Chrome extension store or whatever it is, and just download it really quick. It's free. I think they also have a Mac app. Ignore all these over here. This is my history. I finished the third bit of this tutorial at this point, so I was doing some work on that. So the first part, if you remember, is to create a user with the registration URL. So http localhost 3000 /API /register. We don't need any headers here. We need a body. We need to click x-www-form-url encoded, and we need to set an email equal to equal to your email address, and a password equal to test. Not super secure, but that's okay. Oh, I already created an email. I already created this, but you should see a success message at this point. So next, we are going to go ahead and, yeah, that's weird. Okay, anyway, we're going to go to our authenticate. So post again, and we don't need any headers. We do need a body. Same things though. You can just leave all this the same, and then /API/authenticate. I'm going to change this to my other one. Yay, we got a success message and we have a JSON web token once we sent that request. So copy the JSON web token and then change, let me double check. This is a get route, so change this to get. This is the type of request we're sending. And then in the headers, create one called authorization, paste in the JSON web token you just received, and we're going to change authenticate to dashboard and then send that. It worked. It gave us our user ID. So this is what a Mongo _ID looks like. Okay, so that's pretty much that as far as this tutorial goes. We're seeing it working right now. I guess I can show you just how to get an error on this. Seriously, delete a single one of these, send the request, you're unauthorized. You can change the JSON web token expiration to, like, I don't know, 15 seconds or something, and super fast, authenticate, copy that over, and then try to do a GET request on dashboard. You'll see that if you go before 15 seconds, you're going to be fine. If you go after 15 seconds, you're going to get this unauthorized again. So, you know, congratulations. This is the foundations of an authentication system with JSON web tokens that we can use. It's not really complete. So the client side is going to have a way to store and resend the JSON web tokens in each header request. So we're going to have to look into cookies, local storage, and session storage, and try to figure out which one's the best. From what I've read so far, it looks like cookies might be the most secure way to do this. And a lot of people say cookies aren't stateless, but we're not using the cookies for the actual storing the login information. We're just storing JSON web tokens with it and sending it as, you know, in the request. So it's still stateless. And then how will our users log out from this? Because, you know, it's different using a token authorization header than a standard maybe just like a normal cookie authorization, for example. So how are our users going to log out? We'll probably end up destroying the token on the client side. That's probably the best idea that I can think of. If anybody else has any ideas, I'd love to hear them. And then on the website, I put some links to some articles that I found pretty useful. So go ahead and check those out. And yeah, if anybody has any feedback, anything that you think should be changed, I would love to hear it. I am trying to learn this more effectively, but I'm also trying to share the things that I have learned, so we can all benefit from that. Anyway, thank you for watching, and part 3 is already on the website, and I'll probably make a video running through that here pretty soon as well. Thanks for watching.